Hi, Eric Gibaud, ericgibaud.com, and today I'm going to try to answer a question I receive very often by email or on YouTube comments or I read on Facebook groups is what is my next lens? What lens should I buy? Let's start. Well, the first thing you should ask yourself is why do you need another lens? So I'm going to make several questions that maybe you should ask yourself to define a bit what you need and what you want. There are several reasons to want to have a new lens. One is optical quality and luminosity. It's not exactly the same thing because sometimes you have a lens that is not too luminous but still is very high quality. And sometimes you have a lens that is really luminous and the quality is not there. But I put them together right now, okay? Another reason could be the focal length. You need something that is wider for landscape or for whatever, or something that is a lot longer for animal photography, whatever, okay? Sometimes you want both things. So you have to define a bit what do I need, okay? So sometimes it's easy to know, sometimes it's not easy to know. So the first step I would do is that most people who ask this question, they very often have a kit lens, the one that came with the camera. And maybe the first step would be to better this kit lens, because maybe the focal length they offer is fine, but the image quality could be a bit better, the luminosity could be better. So the first step is, if you use an APS-C, the typical 18 to 55 millimeter could be replaced by a 17 to 50 millimeter 2.8. By the way, I've got a video, I'll leave you the link here, about alternative lenses, okay, to what you get, okay, but it's on all video. So maybe to change for 17 to 50 millimeter 2.8, sometimes it is stabilized. It can be the same brand as your camera, but sometimes it's cheaper to get a Sigma or a Tamron. It all depends. But for APS-C, that would be a good move. If you're micro four thirds, the typical 14 to 42 millimeter that Olympus has and Panasonic has something similar, could be changed to a 12 to 40 millimeter 2.8 Pro in the case of Olympus, and that's a lot higher quality, dustproof, rainproof, all this. It would be a lot better and better built, all this, fast autofocus, everything. When we get to full frame, it's a bit different because very often full frame camera are sold with a good kit lens. There are some exceptions. I reviewed the Canon R6 and the kit lens, the basic one, was not very good lens, 24 to 105, but not the f4 fix. No, it was typical, like a typical kit lens for APS-C, but thought for a full frame. So in this case, yes, you could change to something better. Maybe get a 24 to 70 millimeter 2.8. This focal length have better quality, okay, to work on a better lens with this range of focal length, okay. Then maybe you want to change, once you've done that, maybe you want to change to have a different focal length. You want a lot wider lens. So it's easy. You realize that your lens is not letting you get something really wider or something longer. Your lens is not letting you get to a small bird away or an animal or whatever, and you want something a lot longer. So in this case, well, it's more or less easy to know what you want, wider or longer. But sometimes you don't want something wider or longer. What you want is actually a better quality on a prime lens, but you don't know what prime lens to buy. You say, I just want a 24 millimeter or 50 or 35. What should I buy? And there's one thing that could help you decide. Open your last month pictures in Lightroom, for example, and you check the EXIF with the information. And it will tell you what focal length you were using with your zoom, your kit zoom. So in this case, you will know what is more likely to fit your needs. So if you see you're always on 24 millimeter or close to 40 to 24, like 22 or 26, maybe a 24 would be fine. Or if you're always close to 50, like between 48 and 52 or 55, maybe a 50 millimeter would be fine. I'll stop you here. Many people will comment, so I tell it now, so you don't have to ask in question, is yes, but I see that most of the time my kit zoom is on a 24 millimeter or close to 24. if I go and buy a prime lens that is 24mm, they tell me this is also for full frame. So I calculate it will be for me. Forget it. People make things complicated. If it says you're on 24mm, it is 24mm, whatever sensor size you have. What's different is the angle that it will be covered. But when you check your kit lens, it says 24mm. When you get a lens that goes on full frame, you place it on your APS-C camera, it will look the same 24mm as when you use your kit zoom and you put it on 24mm. It will be the same angle it will cover. So don't worry about this. If it says 24, you need 24. If it says 23, 24. If you say like that, you get the closest, okay? So this is an easy way to know what focal length you normally use. Sometimes you realize you normally use 2, maybe, okay? But that's a first step. Sometimes you want to get better build quality, image quality, but it's not always easy to know what is better, what is not better, what is worse, if it's worth paying this extra money for a lens that maybe is not as good. So the good news is probably if you want to change lens, maybe you want to invest a bit more money and go to a higher quality lens. So in this case, there are some reviews like in DxO Marks. They review normally a bit better lenses, so you will have some information about the quality. But really, it's not always easy. The best way sometimes is to try, like I explained in this month's tips or last month's tips, I think last month, you could actually put a newspaper and make a picture of the text and see how it works, all this. Yeah, it's not always easy to know if it's really a better quality lens. Some people want a lens that is more luminous. I think it's time to update the word luminous. It was fine when we were using analog photography and you had your ISO set by the film and you would not change it until you finished your film. But right now we can change ISO while we're making pictures. So people, when they speak about more luminous lens, they don't actually speak about more light. They speak about shallower depth of field. What they want is something really shorter. And by the way, most people make a big confusion between shallow depth of field and they call it bokeh. This is not the same thing. Bokeh is one thing, shallow depth of field is something else. So I'll leave you a video I made explaining the difference, okay? Sometimes getting a lens that is more luminous means you can open the aperture wider, doesn't mean it will be maybe better quality. Same thing that sometimes a lens is not as luminous, maybe a typical 24 to 70 f4 fix, okay? Very often they are better quality than the 24 to 70 or something similar that is a variable aperture from 2.8 or 3.5 at maximum aperture and minimum angle, and 5.6 or more when you go to the tele part, okay? So it's not luminous, doesn't always means better image quality. And this is when I get to this famous 50mm 1.8 that everyone wants. Very often when they ask what is the next lens I should buy, people tell them get a 50mm 1.8, and they say it in such a way that many people think that every 50mm 1.8 is the same as the other one. No, that's not the way it works. There are many 50mm 1.8, different price, different quality, different builds, and the typical one is many people rush to buy is the Yongnuo 50mm 1.8, which is plastic. Optically, it's not good. It's not very good. So I would say this is probably the best lens for the cheapest price. But any money you spend a bit more on that, you get a lot better lens straight away. So if you don't have money, this is probably the better option. But if you can afford a bit more, you will see a great difference. And the difference is not always the optics. We always think it will be sharper, it will be this and that. But sometimes it's simply that the autofocus is faster, or sometimes it's because in low light it will focus better, or the autofocus motor is not as noisy. So the difference between one and another may be really important. So don't rush buying the first one just because it's a 50mm 1.8. Get some information, compare if you can, okay? If you can't afford, well, you can't afford it, okay? But if you get the cheapest, if you really need a really shallow depth of field, well, the cheapest will make that shallow depth of field, but you will probably sacrifice some image quality. And the big mistake make many people is when they want to buy a lens, they go to a Facebook photography group and they say, I wanted to buy a 50mm 1.8, well, Yongnuo for example, because we're speaking about this one. Show me your pictures. And people publish pictures they make with that lens, and you think, wow, that's a great lens, these great pictures, incredible, I'll make the same one. No. The picture they show just prove they know how to use their gear. They know about photography. It doesn't mean the lens has good quality. And anyway, on the internet, on this site, you will probably not see any difference. So it also means that, well, if all your picture you're going to publish on the internet, never larger size or project it or print it or whatever, all this small defect of the lens probably will never show, so maybe it's okay by getting the cheapest one anyway, okay? But yeah, the way of asking, show me your pictures, will not help you in any way. In what case would it help? Well, let's get to the following point to answer this. The lens that is okay for one person doesn't mean it's okay for another person. The typical people who say, oh, in APS-C for portrait you need a 50mm. Yeah, this is probably the most likely you would work fine with that. But sometimes people like to have a 35mm and get a bit wider thing. Or some people prefer 100mm and get things really compressed to get a different look. So in this case, yes, it may be interesting to ask on the internet or on Facebook to show the picture. But you must make a scientific question is, what lens, what brand, what model, sometimes in a brand you have several models, okay? On what camera, what aperture, and also what speed. Because very often people speak about the aperture and they want to show that they can get a really shallow depth of field, but they don't speak about the speed. And sometimes you see a picture that is not too sharp and you think its problem is the lens. It's actually that the speed was too low, that the person was moving a bit, and this is a really slight motion blur, that it's completely the sharpness. So you need to know that if you see the speed was really slow, it was not on a tripod, you know that this picture is not a valid picture to judge this lens, okay? So it's really important. Don't do what anyone does. Just check what you actually need and ask questions, all this. I actually made a video a couple of years ago about alternative lenses regarding vintage lenses. Well, sometimes you cannot afford this most expensive latest lens, but there are really other good options, but not always vintage, new present lens on the market. That just different lens, different makers, and maybe the kind of picture you make, you don't actually need an autofocus. You could manually focus and that's fine to you. Or maybe you don't need the most luminous, and an f4 would be good for what you do, and you would get maybe a better quality lens for a price that is affordable. So you should check all this. And also there are brands, that alternative brands. That's not just the one of your camera. And people think about Sigma and Tamron, but there are many more lens makers. So try to get some information, compare, ask people what they have, what they can do, what they could do, if they're happy, the speed of autofocus. If you could try it in a shop, would be always a good idea. And then there is the fight part from my side, is against the all-terrain or all-in-one lens, the typical 18 to 200mm or 18 to 300mm. They sell you this lens telling you can do everything with this. And the problem is that it's not that you cannot do everything with this, it's you cannot do anything good with this. So you will sacrifice a lot on image quality just to have one lens. And people don't realize that cameras with changeable lenses were thought in a way that you use the lens you need for such situation. And for another situation, you would use another lens. You always get the best quality for each situation. This is the concept of changing lenses. So now you want to have an all-in-one lens. So if it's for your vacation, travel, and kids, family, all this, and it's just a souvenir, maybe it's not a problem. But if you buy an 18 to 200mm thinking you will get the greatest landscape with the best sharpness, you will get the best portrait with the sharpness you want or the depth of field you want, or you will get the best animal photography, forget it. Everything will be likely bad, okay? So that's a big problem. You will lose a lot on quality. So if your idea is to have one lens for everything, maybe a camera with changeable lenses is not the best option. Maybe you should think about a bridge camera that gets a really long zoom, really long range, a focal range, and also maybe the image quality is not as good, or in low light is not as good, but it won't be worse than an all-in-one lens on your camera, on your reflex or mirrorless camera. In this case, you get something that's probably cheaper and probably a longer zoom, and you will do other things like bird photography and things like this you could do. So maybe instead of buying an 18 to 200mm, you should think about a bridge camera. Well, that's it. It was maybe not my longest video. I tried to be as short as possible, explain the shortest, as simple as possible. I hope it helped you. I hope you liked it. If you feel it may help other people, please share it on social networks. If you have not done yet, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. The small button down here and a small bell. If you click on the bell, get notified when I upload a new video. My website, Gibaud.com. If you have any question, you can leave a comment below. I'll also leave you links of my gear on Amazon and also links to other parts of my YouTube channel. I'll also leave you a link to my PayPal account in case you wanted to make a donation. Thank you very much. Please take care of yourself and see you soon. Bye.